welcome to the last session of the day. I am personally incredibly excited to be doing this. So we have with us Hrag and Horace. Hey, both of you, welcome.
Hey guys.
Before we kick off and have you both talk, I'm going to show a short video talking about the work that's going on with ESC. So give me 1 second here.
The world is changing faster than ever before. In technology, mobility, media, entertainment and sport. Disruption is creating new movements, new communities and new opportunities.
Now is the time for smarter choices. On our city streets, people are demanding new ways to travel, and millions are choosing micromobility as a cheaper, more environmental friendly alternative to the car.
We want to be part of this new mobility movement. At ESC, we are racing the fastest, most advanced e-scooters you've ever seen.
In some of the most iconic city locations in the world, we're bringing accessible, sustainable, thrilling racing to the heart of the cities.
For everyone, we are building a new micromobility sport free of the baggage of the past.
It's time to react.
It's time to change.
It is time to escape.
Awesome.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, no, all I was going to say is, Horace, by all means, you go ahead. You're the one excited about this. So,
all right, well, listen. Thanks, Oliver, for the intro. Just, I am so thrilled because I had this dream of seeing competition come to micromobility, and I mean motorsport type of competition. Since inception, because I had this notion in my head that first the history of transportation has been sort of intertwined with the history of motorsport or sport in general. And if the phrase I used was, if it moves, it gets raced. I mean, people race everything. They race nowadays drones. They've been racing every type of motor vehicle. We were just looking to race, horses before even cars. So we as a tendency want to see competition, and I was just wondering how it would happen, and lo and behold, Hrag came along and made it happen, and he's making it happen in the most exciting way. So this is why I'm so thrilled to have him on our show. Just a quick background. It turns out that Hrag and I went to university in the same town in Boston, Massachusetts, which is a melting pot of amazing cultures. And I'm so also thrilled to have him coming, as he does now, from Lebanon. And I'm actually in Finland right now, and we're basically in the same time zone. It's almost midnight. So so thanks for putting up with our funny schedule. But let me ask you this, okay, just to get the ball rolling here. How did you get this idea? Because I thought it was such a great idea, and I just didn't know who would be the person to bring it to us. And so how did you get into this idea of racing micromobility?
Well, I mean, first of all, I wouldn't say it's my idea. I think we have a group of people, I think, that came up with something really, really cool, and we're super proud of it. Some of us come from a motorsport background, and like Lucas that you guys met earlier, and my co-founder Khalid as well. My exposure to motorsport hasn't been as far along. It really happened when my brother started to race, but I've always been a tech guy. I've always been into tech, and naturally micromobility and mobility in general is a space that I've always followed, that I've always enjoyed. Separately on the family side, we do a lot of VC, and mobility is a space that we follow very much. And so really, as you said, right, if it moves, it races. So in the end, it's something that came up that we thought, okay, what if we had scooters racing? And it all started as a joke, let's say, but then very quickly realized that actually, there's so much relevance behind, just like you said. Racing has always been a successful incubator, successful innovation lab to develop, transportation, to develop safety and technology. And it's just really no different for micromobility, right? So, we're in this time where we really have this amazing opportunity, and we're super excited.
So for some people who may not know this, okay, first of all, there's been a kind of a disruption in the motorsport industry with electric. Just in the way that's happening on the manufacturing
Yes.
side, because Formula E came out of nowhere
Absolutely.
and really captured a lot of the energy in the sport. It's also qualitatively different. You know, if you haven't seen the sport live or on TV, you wouldn't necessarily know this, but basically, because of the fact that these vehicles are quieter, for example, you can have the audience much closer. Because you can do city circuits as opposed to having to be in the middle of nowhere, which is very expensive to set up. But think of what can happen if you go even a step further into micro, where you're dealing with human-sized transport, human-sized vehicles, and you know, the idea of urbanization. So talk us through the logic of would you think that this would be different than what we have today in sort of the type of racing that people may have heard of, like IndyCar or even rally?
Well, it's relevance, right? I mean, you kind of touched on it. So today, you know, we're seeing, you know, cities become more populated, more congested. So in the end, you know, people are looking at this alternative mode of transportation, which is micromobility. And if we look at what happened during the pandemic, you know, it brought micromobility not only as one of the key elements of the transportation ecosystem, but, you know, now micromobility positions itself as a substitute, or let's say as an alternative to even, you know, public transport. So relevance is really key. So, you know, people living in the cities, you know, don't want to get around by cars. They want a fast, efficient way and sustainable, clean way to get around. So this is what micromobility is all about. So, you know, launching a race series, we're talking to all of these people. We're touching all these people. Today, we look at kids, you know, 4 or 5 years old. We all see them play with scooters. You know, they're not electric. They're the 3-wheeler scooters, but every kid now wants to have a scooter. So, you know, these are eventually going to be our future pros, our future champions. But it comes down to relevance, really.
And one of the things that's also interesting about the history of motor racing, again, I didn't know much about this. I watched a couple of documentaries. I watched a couple of even movies about it. And the thing that people may not also realize is just how influential motor racing has been to technology development, to safety engineering, to nowadays to for example, even like kinetic energy recovery system, KERS, which is one of the ideas in Formula now. So, but it's like
Exactly.
it's become they call it the crucible of motor racing, because it's where you kind of push things to the limit, and therefore you might discover how to solve some problems. And so a lot of budgets, I suppose, for Formula or for motor racing, you know, comes out of R&D. Maybe some is marketing, but it's really more and more R&D. Now, talk us through how you thought about the engineering problem solving problems here. You have a partnership with Williams. Is that key to this whole story?
Correct. So basically, it is definitely part of it, but it's, you know, the picture is much bigger than that. So, you know, Williams Advanced Engineering, you know, they've designed our first eSkootr, and, you know, for those of you who don't know Williams, you know, they come from an F1 team, so that, you know, they have a racing legacy. So, you know, development excellence engineering, you know, is really at the forefront. So we wanted to start with, you know, with a partner, you know, that really had these values. But the point is that, you know, we're setting the starting point, but the idea is very quickly to allow teams, you know, to open up certain parts for teams to develop, you know, whether it's, we see development in battery, we see development in the powertrain, you know, to eventually reaching a point where we could see teams develop the entire scooter. And so really this is what it's all about. It's to encourage development, it's to push the limits, you know. So when we look at the electric scooter, you know, there's technology around the motors, there's technology around the battery, there's, you know, technology around, you know, the data that it generates. So all of these elements are things that if we push to the limit, if we experiment with them, you know, we can accelerate development.
And interesting, this may not be well known, but I think Williams was also hired by I'm not going to name names here, but an electric bicycle company to develop some of their powertrain. So it's funny how to see these automotive, so at least in motor racing, we're seeing names there coming up as engineering partners. and that's really positive. Now, I want to touch a little bit about in the history of auto racing. You used to think that the phrase that used to happen or be used was, race on or win on Sunday, sell on Monday. It was like the potential for racing to create demand for the product, and so it was a marketing effort initially. Like a lot of people thought about. Funny story, by the way, Daimler, people may not know this, but Daimler used to be Daimler-Benz, and the Benz is where the motor came from. And Carl Benz was the inventor of the automobile in terms of the motor. And the reason we call it Mercedes, Mercedes-Benz actually, is that's actually Mercedes is a woman's name in Spanish. And how did that get coupled with these German guys is because a promoter of racing events was racing these Benz cars, and it was the fashion in those days to put the name of a woman on the vehicle, and he put his daughter's name. It's like you name ships. You name ships usually after women as well. So he put his daughter's name, and people started to ask for that car by name. I want a Mercedes. And so he convinced the engineers back in Germany to sort of put that name on their cars as well, and he became their largest distributor. So again, there's a rich history of how motor racing and the culture of it drove sales. The other thing I wanted to point out was in the rich histories how emotional people get when you. Whether you're dealing with the 1950s and, kids would be dreaming of becoming racing drivers. They would be sketching racing cars in their notebooks. They would watch television programs like Speed Racer, which was like, I think in the 70s or 60s, but it was like all these fantasies around motor racing. And still to this day, it's one of the most popular forms of sport in the U.S. It's NASCAR. In parts of Europe, it's rally. Formula is global. Emerging markets, it's huge as well. And why is that? You have to ask. I mean, even if you're not an observer or a fan, it's like, what's so emotional about this? And I think it comes down to the fact that the racing figure is a hero. They're seen as a potentially a representative. So, for example, people root for their national, people who are from the same nation, but also they're like representing a group, a tribe, and there's an association with that person that you want to make as a fan. Or maybe in Finland, like people follow guys who are humble because they admire that versus someone who's a showman, and so there's this cultural aspect, and so. One of the things that's intriguing to me from your approach is that you're actually tweaking a little bit the formula here in terms of also associating these heroes with particular skills. Like not everybody's a racing driver. Talk us through the logic of how you see the matchups in terms of the personalities of the drivers or riders.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the hero part is really important, right? So we talk about emotion, winning a championship. These are memories that are created. So to be you need to be gutsy, you need to be strong, you need to be in a position where you want to compete, you want to push. And this is why whether it's a race car or a racer, right? Anybody that races, is seen as a hero is because he's seen as a person pushing to the taking it to the limits, pushing to the limits,
taking risk too.
And taking risk, of course. And so for us, I mean, obviously this is, we want these people to come and race at, our e-scooters and so on. But in the end, we have to do it in a way that not only, we're just putting a bunch of people on scooters that are racing, but we also want, we're creating a whole new sport here. So the idea is we have, to create a new sport, you need to have a ladder, you need to have a full grassroots.
Hrag, if I may ask,
yes,
jump in here. So of the teams that you've seen, you've announced one. Can you let us know who those are, and then who you're thinking about in terms of who those next teams, or like who do you think will end up being in that sort of team dynamic?
Yeah, so actually, I think last week we announced Carlin Motorsport as our first. For those of you who don't know Carlin is basically one of the most successful racing teams from a global perspective. They've raced in every category, let's say, short of Formula One. So whether it's Formula 2, Formula 3, even on the IndyCar side. So really, really top team, and we're super excited to have them on board because for us, it's the ultimate validation. Trevor Carlin, the team principal, really gets what we're after. He gets what we're trying to do, and he's fully on board. So that's really cool. But more than that, I think we're also talking to other teams that are going to come from all kinds of all sides, really. So we're obviously talking to scooter manufacturers. We're talking to racing teams. Whether they're electric racing team or even motorsports teams. And then really we have other technology groups. It's just like a variety really of stakeholders that we're trying to and in the end we want to have a healthy mix of different different backgrounds basically, because we really want to create something that doesn't only touch one sector or one demographic or one audience. This is something that we're
Right.
going for the mass.
So this is what I was trying to get at, and before we lost you, which is like, the premise is that there are some people who might be skateboarders, there might be some people
Exactly.
who are mountain bikers, there might be some people who are, I don't know, surfers, and of course motor racing drivers. But what's interesting is like we don't know what the skill set here. It's like mixed martial arts. Like would the boxer beat the karate guy? And it's so interesting that we have such a clean sheet
Exactly.
of paper. We might have to discover what the skills are necessary to win.
Yep.
And that's why this is going to be so fascinating and so amusing. Also, are you considering more than scooters? Are you thinking about sort of like doing more form factor vehicle types?
Yeah, I mean, look, today, we're racing electric scooters because it's the most exciting and the most, let's say, popular form of micromobility. If things change, then we'll just adapt, right? So it's always, striving for relevance, and in the end, all the racing that happens, everything that happens, it's all about relevance. How can we take, what we get from the racing world and really apply it to the real world? And I'll say one thing, by the way, just touching on the skills that you mentioned. So we've basically been doing quite a bit of testing over the last couple of weeks, and we've had riders from different backgrounds. And it's interesting to see the different riding styles, but what we've seen that's common between all of them is that it's extremely physical. And even those that were extremely fit were actually surprised on how physical it is. So this is something we're super excited about, because it's really like people are going to have to push. People really are going to have to be fit, and so they're going to have to to push to be the best, basically. And
indeed, most people don't realize that being a racing driver is an athlete.
Absolutely,
being an athlete. It's a lot of they work out a lot. You got to also think about making sure you come in at low weight and all that.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, if I may, is there an age limit? And then, like, of the kind of body build for the riders, what are you expecting to see?
Honestly, this is what our commission is working on now. So, we have a group of exceptional people really that have tremendous experience in the motorsport safety and the sporting regulations side. And we're working together with them to really put these regulations in place to make sure we have, fair competition. And, for the first year, we talk, in the global championship, we're going to have to set a certain benchmark. I don't want to say it's going to be professional athletes, but, there's going to be a certain amount, of physical requirements or, fitness for people to be able to participate in it. But once we open up the grassroots, then, you're starting to create and develop the talent, So then you start to get this huge talent pool that teams can start recruiting from.
There's a question.
I gotta.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Ask one more question. Besides form factors, I think that's going to come later. You got to walk before you run. But the next question is: are you looking at circuits being entirely like we talk about cities as the primary venues? But have you thought of doing these are closed circuits? Have you thought of doing maybe across distances like kind of what rallies are, or even endurance, which I think is fascinating because Le Mans, which is a 24-hour race, really stresses you out as far as the design. And I wonder if there's a because Micro's thought of as a short distance thing, but if you can say, hey, you can use it for long distances too, because it's got a whole different dynamic there with batteries and swapping or not. And I'm just curious how you think about different types of circuits.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that will definitely be flexible too, right? I mean, when you look at rally, if you take it for rally and circuit racing, the cars are built very differently. So that means that if we're going to look at longer distances, if we're going to look at, let's say, off-roading, we're going to talk about different types of vehicles as well. So today our focus is definitely racing in cities and in cityscape, because again, we want to showcase the scooter, we want to showcase micromobility in its natural habitat. Let's put it that way. So we want people to really get close to it, people to experience it and to really feel it. And then, endurance, I think, is a natural progression, right? I'm sure we'll see endurance, we'll see, off-road racing. And yeah.
That's really exciting. I just saw, by the way, there's a series, not series, but sort of like a yearly competition trying to cross Australia with a solar powered car, which is like a whole different set of constraints there. So, Oliver, did you have?
There's a question in the chat here, which is, will we see men and women competing against each other, or will this be a male-dominated sport? And I'm just curious.
No. Honestly, I mean, for us, this, our sport, we're striving for, we want our sport to be accessible. We want it to be inclusive. So, in that sense, there's absolutely no restrictions. We want to encourage everybody to participate, and we want to make it so that anybody can participate. And this is really where the grassroots again will play a huge role, because without a ladder and a grassroots, you can't grow the sport. So inclusiveness, accessibility, I mean, these are at the forefront of our mission.
Yeah, very cool.
Awesome.
Then on that note, is there a so when you say like you want to open it up, so there'll be a professional, will it be sort of like an amateur, or will you imagine sort of people doing this as a hobby, setting up like local meetups and trying things out, and is that how you see this growing?
Definitely. So once we launch the global championship, I think we're gonna learn a whole lot from there. But we have this plan of really developing national and regional infrastructure. Working with key stakeholders in every area to build national infrastructure to allow. We want to democratize this, right? We want anybody. We want anybody that wants to go racing, to be able to go to the nearest, whether it's a karting track or the nearest facility, get a scooter and just start racing, basically.
You should see the comments we're getting. David here says, "Where's the sign up? I want to volunteer."
Yeah, absolutely. When there's a really good point as well from Nathan here about the relative affordability for it relative to auto racing. Can you talk, because we've talked about this, Hrag, can you talk through how you're thinking about that and what it'll mean?
Yeah, so I mean, motorsport. If you talk about auto racing, let's say, unfortunately, today it's become prohibitively expensive, and unless a billionaire,
it's a rich man.
If a billionaire around you who's willing to help you get there, then you'll make it. For example, people talk about Lewis Hamilton being the last working class driver, and so this it makes it less accessible in that sense, right? So for us, again, we're creating a platform, we're creating something where it's competitive, it's competition, it's racing, but it's at a fraction of the cost. So even I think in the previous chat, I think Lucas mentioned, someone asked Lucas, is it even cheaper than karting? And the answer is yes. I mean, if you want to go into professional karting, you can end up putting a pretty hefty budget together. So that's not the case. That's not the case for us.
I mean, I think that not only is it cheaper in terms of the vehicle, but it's cheaper in terms of the venue. You don't need billion-dollar facilities. You don't, and you could probably set up and have a competition in a fairly small and cheap area.
Exactly. I mean,
inside a stadium.
I mean, you're talking about like racetracks that are let's say 500 to 700 meters. Let's say, so that's what 1,500 feet. So that's that's really, it's a very small footprint, and it's not like you're moving, let's say, from a go-kart racetrack to a proper racing circuit. The progression is still around the same environment, still around the same ecosystem, so automatically it just makes it much more accessible.
Yeah, karting is something. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry,
I was just going to say, in that regard, then, if you've only got such a short track, then you'd really want a technical. Like, in some ways, I feel about it and go like, you look at some of the kind of US blocks, right? Like, what are you going to do? You're going to go around the block once. You want a kind of quite highly technical track, because this makes for far more exciting viewing.
Yeah.
So, how are you thinking about for the cities that you're looking to go to, in terms of things like track placement and things like that?
So basically, one of our partners is Alex Voice, and Alex again comes from, is an ex-F1 driver, comes from a motorsport background, and he's also a track designer. So, he's played a huge role in safety, and he's really he's playing a huge role really developing our circuits. So in the end, depending of the space that we get, we could end up having a circuit that's very technical, that has, let's say, very technical corners, or we could have a circuit that has, let's say, longer straights, where it'd be a bit of a faster lap. So, you could, based on the footprint that you get, you can always adjust, and you can always develop something, for a specific type of goal.
I mean, would you think that a karting type of track would be appropriate, or are they? Because karting, maybe people out, in the U.S. may not know about this, but I don't know. I haven't seen much karting in the U.S., but there's a lot of it here in Europe, where it can be even indoors, but it's like basically a lawnmower engine, put on a vehicle that's barely, 5 feet long or something like that. And the tracks are small. So would that work?
Yeah, they can. I mean, I think you have your karting tracks can go, let's say, up to 1.5 kilometers, but the smaller karting tracks definitely would work. And so, yeah, I mean,
it's like the relationship between golf course and what is that small golfing? What is it called?
The mini golf, the putting golf.
Mini golf.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
but you can do a lot more of it, though.
Look, let me just say this. Karting tracks can play a very big role in this, like, expanding our grassroots platform. So it's definitely, we definitely see ourselves, working with such facilities or using such facilities to develop the junior and, let's say, the entry level racing.
Yeah, because this seems like it's there already, and it's clean. The one thing I've tried karting a couple of times, because everybody does it in Finland, and I remember even when I worked at Nokia that we went to a karting event as a team building, and I just get nauseous. And I was nauseous partly because I maybe I get motion sickness, but also because it was actually using gasoline engine, and the fumes were just building up in the building because it was indoors, and I just felt sick. But I would imagine with electric, you could solve that problem to begin with. So and yeah, it would be really thrilling. Now let's talk a little bit about safety. Are you concerned that there might be injuries? I know it's possible, but it's like motorcycle racing is actually probably safer than people think, because you got the runoff areas. Absolutely. And people have body armor and they have helmets, obviously, and so I don't know. How do you think about safety?
Yeah, I mean, look, safety is obviously it's always been our number one priority, and from the day that we started this project, safety has been at the forefront, and it's been something that we've been targeting. So this is again where the commission plays a big role. Some of the people we have in that team, are really the safety experts. They've developed. They've developed, safety methods and measures that we've seen in let's say, in other motorsport championships, basically. So, they're, helping us. So from, we're looking at things like, the equipment, the gear, the types of barriers, the lines of protection, so there's a lot of crash testing that happens. And that's really a big part of the program, really, because, and this is one of those areas where, if we look, we look at helmets, we look at, let's say, body gear, we look at barriers. These are things that, have relevance, right? These are things that we can take learnings from there. We can really translate them into the real world.
And one interesting, I can't help but think that, crashes are a big part of sport. There's a lot of excitement. Obviously, you don't want injuries, but there's some contact that's going to happen. I wonder what it's like on the track, with people, like, because it's not the vehicles that are going to touch, it's the people, right? You're going to be, you'll be in the position to tackle someone, and it's funny how you're going to regulate it, number one, but two, you might want to see a little bit of physical action there. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting, right? Bruce, you're laughing, but I want I want to see some full contact there,
Totally.
Well,
I'm laughing at James Gross, co-founder of Micromobility Industry, saying, "I love this future. Right in my veins, please."
I know he's going to be on the track. I know
he is. Look, folks, I've got a couple. I'm conscious there's a couple of questions that have come through, and I'd be keen to ask them of you, Hrag. So one is Forest North, who debuted his Neptune scooters today and was the founder of Mission Motorbikes. Said, "Look, will there be a hill climb component?" And then there's another question here: are the cities or the stops for the championship already selected, or are you still looking for candidates? Because I think there's a lot of people on this call who might be interested in working out if they could get it into their city.
So let's break this down. So on the hill climb side, I think we talked about this earlier. In the future, I don't see why not, but I think we're going to see different types of vehicles again. But today, really, our priority is the cities. In terms of discussions. 2021, we're focusing really, it's our opening season. So it's our season 0, let's say, is what we call it. Honestly, with COVID, with the pandemic, with the volatility, we'd be ahead of ourselves, or, we'd be kidding if we said we'd have a full blown season. The last thing we want to do is launch a full season without the ability of people coming to these races. So, we're going to have, probably 3 to 4 events this year. And I can say that's going to be between Q3 and Q4. And actually, we already have 2 potential venues that will be announced quite soon. But for 2022, that's a whole different story. We're talking about a full-blown championship. 8 to 10 rounds, and it's going to be global. So we're talking about Europe. We're talking about the US. We're talking about potentially Asia eventually, and. So yeah,
so many questions. Let me ask one more. What about the business side of things? Are you looking for sponsors? Are you looking for funding? Are you looking for how do you intend to monetize this, or is this something that we shouldn't even think about right now?
No, I mean it's a very valid question. We definitely know how we want to monetize this, and it's for us the biggest thing we want to build is a fan base. For his sport, the biggest success is creating this fan base. So for us, building a fan base where, and let's say in a community where we allow fans, riders all together to interact, get involved. This is really a big part of what we're after. In terms of sponsors, we're actually announcing a couple of partnerships that we're locking in over the next few weeks. They're definitely important as part of our journey, but we want, the sponsors that we want on board, that partners that we're speaking to, they all share our value. They all share our mission, on the sustainability side, on the accessibility side, on the racing side. So in the end, we're super excited to do this. We're not doing it alone. We want partners to join us, and we want partners that share our vision to come and join us, really.
No, I can imagine. Because I think, like, if you think about the supply chain in both scooter and e-bikes, you got Bosch, you got some pretty big automotive names already lining up there, and I think this is a perfect fit for them. Let's talk a little bit also about the fact that you talk about inclusion, you want to talk about being accessible. Is there also sort of a way to entice cities that this is something that builds community, that is as opposed to something that that makes difficult for cities? Because why do we don't see more racing in cities? It's because it's so polluting.
It's disruptive, right? I mean, this is one thing. Is on one hand, the footprint of our circuits are going to be so small. So in terms of disruption, it's actually very minimal. So this is why cities tend to be a little bit more excited as well. But more importantly, it's not just about racing. It's really about, there's a huge community and education piece to all of this. So in the end, when we go race in a city, we're not just setting up, for one day, we're racing and then we're leaving. There's a legacy that we want to establish. We want to help these cities, together with all the stakeholders, that are participating in this conference, helping cities, spread awareness, reach the young generation, create programs, whether it's let's say riding programs and eventually, racing programs, but really the legacy piece is really important.
Yeah, totally. And I can imagine also, let's face it, it's going to have to be sexy, and it will be. It's going to be attractive. It'll be eye candy, and I think the other thing, because like you think about Monaco, you think about all the mystique that has grown up. I mean, you can do so much more than that. Even it should be the destination for a lot of brands. Yes. It should be the destination for a lot of celebrities. I could imagine, even having celebrities doing racing, because it is more approachable. You could have a race of all the glitter out there. So this has so many dimensions to it, and it's why I love micromobility as the platform for launching so many new business ideas, and that just racing is such a great one, and it seems so natural. Anyway, any questions from the audience?
Yeah, we've got a couple more, and then I'm conscious we should probably cut it there. But there
was one on autonomous.
Yeah, there was one about autonomous scooter, but that's okay. I think that was a joke. I think there's a question there about the choice to go with only one. It's interesting that you abstracted the vehicle manufacturer at this level, so you've only gone with one vehicle manufacturer. I'm kind of curious if you could talk through that, Hrag, about your strategy in that space.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So to be honest, we're actually not abstracting. We actually have manufacturers that are actually that we are in discussion with and that are interested in joining the championship. But the main reason why we decided to start with let's say a common vehicle is that if you start racing and you tell everybody just develop your own thing and just show up on track, you're not going to have competition. The disparity is going to be really, really great. So we wanted to create an equal. We wanted everyone to start on an equal foot, and at the same time, keep in mind, manufacturers or anybody that wants to develop a race scooter, in the end, they'll be racing an actual race scooter. So, in the time where they're racing, let's say the Williams design scooter, this is actually a huge learning period for them. They're gathering, a lot of data. They're learning about behavior. They're learning about, how scooters should be ridden, which just means that when we open up for more design, then they'll be in a much more knowledgeable place to actually do that. And at the same time,
for people who don't know, Formula E started, I think, with a single manufacturer as well. So they had effectively same cars, although maybe you could do some setups differently, and there was teams could do some optimizations. But I think as it progressed, the big names wanted to be part of it. So Mercedes wanted to be there. The big motor companies, they all wanted to have a part of this, and so they had to change the rules. But so now, for example, Lucas, I think he was with Audi, and they were a big player there. Yeah, so I can imagine that happening here as well. It's such a fertile land for engineering, and this would be applicable to not just micro. They could be learning a lot about traction control, ABS, things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
There's one further question here, which is how do you get spectators onto a small plot of land, if indeed we are talking a smaller thing? How do you think about that?
It's all about the event design. It's all about the track design. So we're definitely maximizing this. The other thing is, the lines of protection and the barriers that we're working on. Horace, you kind of touched on this, but we're doing it in a way that we could have actually fans quite close to it. On one hand, because it's electric, so there's no pollution, there's no fumes, and because of the way we're designing those barriers, I think we're going to have the opportunity to have people really up close to the racing, and that's what we want. We want people to feel it. We want people to get close to it.
I mean, you can do it in the stadium, I would imagine, because and stadiums are packing 50 to 100,000 people easily, and it depends how it feels, if it's constraining or not. But I think you have fundamentally what you have here is a huge degree of freedom. You can decide and design, and you can go in all kinds of directions and see what works. Over time, people will work out what works, and that's special access there. There's a budding racing scene in electric skateboards already starting.
Yeah,
there's all kinds of ad hoc series.
Yeah, the only there's a question here about the perhaps in the future you could standardize on the powertrain but allow for a custom scooter design. The part that I'm actually thinking about, and this is a sort of a general question in the industry, is about this idea of being able to design like standards for scooter design, so that you end up with like particular models.
Exactly.
And just if you've thought anything about that.
Yeah. So again, this is where the commission plays a role. So the commission on the sporting side, they basically set, let's say, the standards, the specifications for let's say season 0, season 1, and then from every season, you're constantly learning. So you're gonna, after every season, you're gonna adapt. We'll definitely, and it could be either way, right? It could be in a way that let's say we decide to open up the drivetrain, or we decide to open up the battery, and then eventually open up the chassis itself, or we might decide to keep the chassis, standardized at all times. So it's a process that always has to be revised to make sure that we always encourage development and we always maximize the technology that comes out of there, basically. So, because this is ultimately what we strive for, and at the same time keeping the racing really fun and close.
Excellent. Cool, folks. Well, look, I'm conscious of time, and I'm aware we've gone already half an hour over. So I wanted to say thank you, Hrag. It's so wonderful to have you on, and to hear about it, because it is, as Horace has kind of alluded to, we've been both very excited about this micromobility racing, and thinking that there's obviously huge opportunity in that, and I really think you get it, and maybe we get what you're doing,
So make sure you guys sign up and go to the website, esc.live, live, right?
Yeah,
and
esc.live.
Sign up.
Instagram, esc.live. We just announced our first team. We announced our pledge to the UN to actually be carbon neutral by 2022. And there's just much more coming, including the scooter launch over the next couple of weeks and months.
Sign up for alerts and things?
Yeah, sign up to our newsletter on our website.
Yep.
There's a lot happening, so watch out for the space.
And follow on Twitter. That's how I actually discovered these guys. So make sure you track what's going on, because the news is gonna come fast in the next few weeks.